Well, I get a lot of technical difficulty visited on me when I interview with various programs because there are folks and forces out there that just do not want what I have to share to reach the public. So,
and I definitely understand that. Yeah, because I went into your website and I was looking at all of the information, and obviously you know your stuff. You are very well researched, and I appreciate that because I'm an individual. I've actually had a UFO experience where I've seen a UFO. The experience was involved where the daughter of the woman was communicating with the UFO, and the entities on the UFO communicated to the lady's daughter that they were there for her, just not at that time. And so it is very interesting that UFOs and aliens are basically something that certain elements don't want us to interact with, don't want us to understand, and so on.
Yes, sir. Well, Dr. Boylan, we would love to start off with the most simplest question, which would be, how and what got you into the starseed research?
Well, I was a mild-mannered psychologist for many a year, counseling people, and in 1989, things took a little turn in a different direction. That was the first year that people started to come in, and after we chatted a bit about their day-to-day problems, they decided to let their hair down and tell me about an encounter they had had with a visitor from the stars. And they said, Doc, I'll fully understand if you commit me to the mental institution here. But I had already seen a UFO for myself and read on this subject a very long time. In fact, I was around before there was a UFO cover-up. When the day when UFOs were sighted, it was reported in the newspaper like the weather and news from Washington and anything else. So, old-timers like myself aren't very impressed by the UFO cover-up because we know it was artificially imposed and that the truth used to be told without drama decades ago. So when these clients of mine told about their encounters, I listened carefully, and of course I used my psychologist skills, and I could tell whether a person was mentally ill or making it up as they go or not, and these people were not, either of those. They were telling the truth. Some of them held very responsible positions in society. And so I became intrigued by this, and I began working with these experiencers and putting out word in the community that I welcomed other people who had these kind of experiences to come in and talk. And pretty soon we had a support group going, and it grew. And as I followed these experiencers over the next several years, I noticed a pattern that when they had kids, these kids were more advanced than regular kids. They were psychic. They seemed to grow up faster. They seemed like adults in kid bodies. They were strikingly different and advanced. And so I started not only paying attention to these experiencers, but also to these what I now call star kids, these transformed kids that they were having as a result of either visits or the star visitors coming down and becoming the person that was incorporated in the child they had. So that work has pretty much taken over and consumed my focus from then on these past, what is it now? A good almost 15 years. So it has been quite a journey.
It definitely sounds like that. Well, what do you think about that, Douglas? That is a wild journey, if you ask me.
Well, it's always interesting when people find that they're kind of involved in traditional things, and then all of a sudden something that's kind of outside of that comes into the foray, and then that becomes the primary work. One of the things that I noticed on your website is that you talk about star kids and star seeds, and I was wondering if you could explain what is a star kid and what is a star seed?
Okay, very simply, a star kid is a child who's more advanced, brighter, usually has a more robust health and immune system. They tend to have double handfuls of psychic gifts. They tend to grow up faster and yet age more gracefully at the back end of their life, more what we would call more slowly aging. These kids are formed in two basic ways, one of which is their parents were visited by a star visitor who borrowed some of their reproductive material, did a little what we would call gene splicing with it, adding a bit of the star visitor genes, and then when that adult went on to have children, the child they have is much more advanced than the regular kids of previous time. The other way that happens is star visitor, as many of them are doing, observes Earth and our civilization and the troubles we're having, and decides to incarnate as a human for this incarnational lifetime go-around to come down here and help. And these star visitors, when they incarnate as a human, bring along enough of their advanced consciousness and psychic abilities that even though they look completely human, that they function at a higher level. So these are the two ways that star kids happen, and of course once star kids hit 18, you stop calling them kids, and so the term we tend to use is starseed adult. And these are the advanced people that are in our population in increasing numbers. They really started pouring in the late 1980s, and now we have a situation where so many of the children being born are star kids that they constitute over 96% of the kids being born today. So you can see that within a generation or two, the entire human race is going to be star seeds.
Wow, that is truly amazing. What began this upgrade or jump start to this dispensation of these star seeds?
Well, as they say, I'm glad you asked me that question. I'm going to give you and the listeners a very, very quick review of a revised history of the human race. The parts that matter are these. About 350,000 years ago, star visitors came down and took some primate genetic material, reproductive material, and gene spliced some of their own genes into it. And the resulting product was what we call Homo sapiens, the original human. And this explains why there's a missing link, that all those upright, rambling, shambling, low brow ridge type hulks that used to walk around dragging their knuckles on the ground are no longer among us and have been replaced by Homo sapiens. And star visitors allowed this experiment to go on about 175,000 years, and they saw that humans, developed culture and roamed around and spread across the lands. But they still retained an awful lot of the animal side aggressiveness and territoriality and dominance kind of way of conducting themselves. And so they came back, the star visitors did, and took some of the reproductive material from Homo sapiens and gene spliced some more of their genes in, and the resulting product was Homo sapiens sapiens, modern human. And again, they gave this about 175,000 years to run as and see how this model turned out. And things, as we know, advanced quite a bit. Humans spread across all 5 continents and developed high civilizations and made many advances. However, their their technological and scientific advances got ahead of their moral and spiritual development, and probably the nth case of this imbalance was when we developed atomic bombs and then dropped them on a couple cities to obliterate them. At this point, the Star Visitor said, "Whoa, we have a problem, Houston. You know, this experiment is not going as we had hoped." So that's when they started, give or take, to really try the third upgrade, Homo sapiens 3.0, if you will, which is the star kids and the star seed adults, another genetic upgrade. And this one seems to have done the trick, because I've worked with many hundreds, if not thousands, of these star kids and star seed adults.
And you believe this actually started in 1980 or around then?
Well, not exactly the very first prototypes. You know, I'm a star seed, and I hatched a lot earlier than 1980, I assure you, more like 1939. And then there were a few prototypes even before that. Nikola Tesla, Albert Einstein come to mind, and a few other outstanding individuals. But it was in the 1980s that they tinkered with the recipe, I can assure you, because I'm an old model star seed, and these star kids being born today can run circles around me. So they tinkered with the recipe a bit, and by the late 1980s, they had gotten it right, and they started going high volume. And as I say, the star kids pouring in now reached a point where now almost all the kids being born are star kids, and we have a real revolution in human society happening kind of underneath us in a quiet way that soon will not be so quiet.
Well,
oh, go ahead, Douglas.
I was just going to say, well, do you think within the context of star seeds, as far as the genetic engineering that we're going through, that it's designed to assist us to evolve beyond I noticed some of the things that you referred to in your website about basically false doctrine or artificial disseminated information to kind of confuse us and so on. Do you think that these star seeds and these star kids are here to simply evolve the human species into something more responsible and conducive to the bio design that we are?
Absolutely. That is the whole point. And this is not just an arbitrary tinkering in a biology lab, you know, on the part of the star visitors. Mm-hmm. Their intent is that we reach our fullest and highest potential as intelligent spiritual beings. Mm-hmm. And that is the whole point of the recipe tinkering, if you will. Every planet's different, and every planet's native species are different, and when the star visitors came down, and out of respect for Earth and her natural animal life here, picked the what seemed like the most promising species of primates to grasp some intelligence onto, they did so with the understanding that there's a bit of imprecision when you do this on every planet. And
well, Dr. Boylan, I'm sure you know of Zecharia Sitchin's work, and he also speaks about the genetic manipulation that went on during the ancients, and he also refers of the primates at the time that was the species that was basically tampered with. Would you see any credence in Zecharia Sitchin's work? Because obviously he is definitely within the paranormal realms, and we speak all things paranormal here.
Well, Zecharia Sitchin has popularized the Sumerian lore. The problem I have with what Zecharia Sitchin does in large scope is that he takes Sumerian legends and serves them up to the contemporary public as though they were news dispatches out of the New York Times. I've studied Middle East literature, and there are considerable distortions in there and human tinkering. You know, we could even say the same thing about the Bible and other ancient books.
Yeah.
The original heart of the message that star visitors came down and gave the people in the what we now call Iraq, the Mesopotamian Valley, a fast forward on culture, that part is certainly correct, and it's not exclusive to Mesopotamia either. Star visitors elsewhere in the world came down and gave the Mayan and Aztec cultures a fast forward, and in Africa the Dogon, and
so is there any correlation
Egypt,
with
so forth?
Is there any correlation with what we know as the Anunnakis and the star visitors?
Well, the Anunnaki is merely a Sumerian term for people from the sky who came down to Earth, messengers, if you will. And indeed, the Christian Bible, Old Testament Genesis, borrows that same term, only they use, in the Greek, the angelos, angels, which again, when you go back to the original meaning, the word means messengers from the sky.
Yes.
These are vestigial and somewhat distorted memories over time of sky visitors. And the star visitors didn't come down just with test tubes and do a little genetic upgrading. They also came down from time to time and sent some of their wisest teachers among us and tried to help people move ahead culturally and in terms of education and understanding things like astronomy and mathematics and archaeology and architecture and medicine and so forth. So the efforts have been there. Where Zechariah Sitchin, who unfortunately is peddling a version of the legends that emphasizes all the human additions about emperor-like figures that conducted wars with each other and had territorial conquest in their mind. That is not star visitor stuff. Unfortunately, he presents those distorted legends as though that was original reports, like he was a reporter for NBC on the spot calling it as it happened. And no way did that happen. He's reporting the human dramatic distortions as though that was star visitor behavior, and that's where I take exception with Zechariah Sitchin and think that he's doing a real disservice by presenting such a distorted picture of the star visitors' intervention in our earlier history.
Yeah, one of the things that I came across, I took the liberty of printing out your article, findings about the real star visitors versus the bogeymen of the cover-ups propaganda. And on page 2 of that article, you have about 2/3 of a paragraph where you write about Zechariah Sitchin's writing and what he has to say. And I thought that was pretty interesting, because one of the things that we have to be mindful of with information is if we pay attention to the wrong details, a lot of the information that we're going to get is simply erroneous information about what we are, who we are, how we came into existence, the role of the soul, and so on. Yeah,
and kind of looping back to the earlier question along with this, the point of the star visitor intervention in our development is to allow us to become, reach our full potential as highly spiritual, highly morally advanced, highly sensitive, compassionate, loving, peaceful, intelligent beings.
Well, do you find
the kind of warlike, territorial, materialistic culture that we find handed to us by our ancestors is utterly unworthy of us, and I can assure you that as the star kids come of age and form the majority in our society, we're going to find that kind of behavior becomes obsolete and will be looked back on with disdain.
Well, do you find that star kids are here to kind of show us that we can develop these extrasensory abilities as far as like telepathy and the psychic ability and the abilities to heal and the ability to understand and the ability to kind of get along within the context of our idea, not only within the context of the planet, but also within the context of the greater galactic community?
Absolutely. The punchline, if we can jump to that, of all this development is that after we as humans starseed humans, many of us, clean up our society and reach our full potential, lay aside the warring and the fighting over territory and the I got mine, screw you kind of culture that we find ourselves too often surrounded with. After we get past that and reach our full potential as a high-minded, spiritual, sensitive society, we will get an invitation from the star nations, may I say a standing invitation, to join the larger community of inhabited worlds that is called star nations. It's sort of the UN of the galaxy. In other words, an assemblage, an organization of inhabited planets of high development that enjoy relating to each other and trading cultural tips and learning from each other and living in harmony. That is our future. That is our children's and our grandchildren's future. When the kids of today come of age, I am confident and absolutely positively when our grandkids of today come of age, that's going to be their world. Their world will be the galaxy. They will regularly experience seeing themselves or their friends or somebody they know get on ships and go out into space and visit other civilizations, and having some of those folks come and visit us on a come-and-go basis. The territory, the cultural horizons of the human race will no longer be Earth, but will be the galaxy.
Wow.
And that really makes a lot of sense, because I think that's what we have is that we are basically evolving so that we go from something that's, like you said, territorial and planetary-based to moving into something that's more cosmic and more all-encompassing. I noticed on your website that you have a lot of information, and I was wondering if you could share with the audience that's listening now, how can they get in contact with you and how can they get your books? I do know I was reading online your book that you have posted that you can read, and I read about 20 pages of the book, and it's very interesting information, and I was wondering if you could share with the audience how they can get in contact with you, your website, and how can they get a hold of your books.
Absolutely. My website is real simple, www.drboylan.com. That's drboylan.com. So you go there and you'll see tons of information. To get a hold of me personally, the way I like is email, and again, that's pretty simple. It's Dr. Boylan, drboylan @sbcglobal.net. sbcglobal.net. So that's how you get a hold of me. As far as my books, I have 4 of them out, writing a 5th, but the ones that are out are, my first one is Close Extraterrestrial Encounters. All of the books that I have out are out of print. Amazon sometimes carries used copies of that. Labor Journey to the Stars, that is absolutely out of print. I self-publish that, and I'm not making any more additions to that. Basically, I put all the information contained in that book on my website, so if you read my website, stem to stern, you will have what was in that book. Project Epiphany is for sale on Amazon, and you can get your copy very easily there. Star Kids, The Emerging Cosmic Generation, my latest book, is the hard copy version of that sold out. So as a kind of Christmas gift a while back to the human race, I put it online. And so you can read it for free online at my website, or download it off my website and read it at your leisure by going to www.drboylan.com/ let me get it straight here so I don't misquote myself, /StarKidsPDF.pdf. So that's drboylan.com/starkidspdf.pdf. And that will call it up, and there's a free book sitting in front of you. And by the time you read that book from one end to the other, you will know pretty much everything you'd like to know about star kids and starseed adults. And I know many of the people listening here are star kids or starseed adults, and you will see yourself reflected in those pages.
Yeah. Well, we do have the book linked up on the site right now, so anybody who is interested, please go ahead and click on it. It's right on the listening page, and you can order that. And as he suggested, go on his website, check all that information out. But we have plenty of questions for you, Dr. Boylan. The next one would be, we have a lot of callers. We'll bring them on after a few more questions because we have too many questions that we need to get out before we get the callers on. The obvious question which would be, what are the different characteristics of the starseeds?
Well, there are so many we could speak about. Let me speak about some of the most obvious ones. These are the ones I like to start people with who are scratching their heads and not so sure about this here business of star kids. Ones that they can kind of see for themselves. Many star kids have slightly larger heads, craniums, if you will, particularly in the front or the top part of the head. And oddly enough, that is where psychic abilities happen or higher intelligence happens. So you could say, and it would be correct, that the upgrade in genetics that star kids reflect includes a larger brain case, as the doctors call your skull, with more room for more brains. And more abilities, psychic to be specific. Another thing that is true about star kids and starseeds in general that's kind of easy to see physically for yourself is an expanded, what I call bioelectromagnetic field around the person. Through research, I've learned that the average old-style human put out an electric field about a foot out from their body. But star kids and starseed adults put out a bioelectromagnetic field about several yards out from their body. It would not be exceptional for that field to stick out 12 feet or 15 feet or 20 or more. I think the going record is somewhere north of 50 feet out.
Wow.
But it's certainly no 12 inches, and if you use dowsing rods, you can see that where the field boundaries are very easily. I have an article on my website that tells people how to make their own set for free and do that. And you can see it for yourself. Another thing about that expanded energy field is that it has the characteristic of often enough causing, when a star kid or starseed adult goes by one of those orange sodium vapor street lights, that it will wink out. My understanding of things is that the electrical field of the star kid swamps that plasma field of highly energized gases inside the street light and causes it to collapse, so that there's only a thin little orange wire glowing in there, but that whole ball of gas that caused a lot of light to happen falls apart for a while. We don't break street lights; they come back on later, but they go off for a while. They kind of, let's say, this star kid kind of blew the street light's mind temporarily. Other things that you can kind of tangibly see, and since we're still such a physical, I got to see it to believe it culture, I would say, is when star kids sometimes go by TVs, the picture will get snowier, it'll change channels, or they go by a radio, same thing. Sometimes when they wear wristwatches, they don't behave quite right because the electronics on the wristwatch get interfered with by the electrical field of the starseed. Getting to less physical attributes, certainly these kids have a natural spirituality that's very charming. They're not often very much for sitting in church on Sunday in formal religion settings, but their natural spiritual attunement to God in nature, shall we say, an awareness of source and of the sacredness of life and the various ways it manifests, including gentleness with animals and plants, and not to see it as something annoying in your way, but as fellow life forms that deserve respect is there. And psychic abilities. Certainly almost everybody has telepathy, the ability to mentally communicate silently back and forth. And sometimes the ability to move objects, so knowing what's going to happen in the future, getting downloads of information into your head that you didn't have to study to get. Being able to communicate across species, like kids talking to their pet dog and telling the mother what the dog is trying to say. Being able to see auras around people, and some people are so good at that they can tell from the color of the aura whether the other person's in good health or poor health, or in a good mood or a rotten mood, just by looking at their aura. Almost all of these star-season kids can do psychic healing, and even some of them psychic diagnosis. In other words, being able to stand away and read the person's energy field and see if they're sick and where the problem is, and then to pour some healing energy in that direction to make the person better. And on and on. We could talk about the ability to make oneself appear invisible, or raise off the ground, levitation, working with Mother Earth to heal, or causing time to speed up or slow down, being aware of upcoming earthquakes or things like car crashes that are going to happen around the corner, being able to travel out of body, often at night, but sometimes during the day, and go somewhere else and see things and learn things and come back into your body with that information. Being a conduit for star visitors to come and give you some messages for you to pass on. And on and on. These kids are an amazing handful, and if people go to my website, there's an article called 42 Signs Your Child May Be a Star Kid. It's a little misnamed. Everything in there applies to grown-up starseed adults just as much. But that article will lay it all out for you.
Great. Yeah. That was a wealth of information. And off of that question, to segue off of that, what would be the different, or could you elaborate on the various starseed nations that are out there?
Well, some of the more common ones we can talk about easily. There are 1,483 different star races.
Oh, wow.
That make Earth their point of focus to try and help. Not all of them come here physically, and certainly not all the time, but I can tell you who some of the frequent flyers are. I'm sure some of our guests are already aware of who some of the frequent flyers are, and so we'll start with perhaps the most frequent flyer, and that would be the Zetas. Some people call them the Grays, but I try and avoid calling people by their skin color. We kind of learned in the U.S. a while ago that was a no-no. So the Zetas from Zeta Reticuli.
A question on the Zetas, Dr. Boylan. Are they actually trans-organic beings? Because that concept gets thrown around a lot.
Well, I don't even know what that word would mean.
Or,
pretty good
or we can say biomechanical.
No. That's part of the propaganda that the Cabal, the New World Order type.
So I'm sure you've heard that spiel before.
Oh, yeah. It's what they're trying to do is dehumanize these persons, and they are persons, fellow persons.
Sort of like what they
try to dehumanize them, well, etc.
Yes.
It's more like war propaganda. If you call Germans Huns or Japanese people Nips, or if you call Russians Reds, you kind of dehumanize them. They're no longer a person. They're kind of a category, and it makes it easier to shoot at them. And believe me, the Cabal are all about shooting at these folks or taking them captive. So what you're hearing with a lot of this indelicate vocabulary that the Cabal have encouraged in the UFO community is basically war propaganda at work. So there are tall zetas and short zetas, to kind of vastly oversimplify it, but there are variants within them. Some have 3 fingers, other 4, other 5, and some have head shapes a little different than others. But basically, for convenience, we kind of lump a lot of these folks that look more or less alike in that category. Other frequent flyers to Earth, in no particular order of frequency, we'd have to mention what some people call the Nordics, the Pleiadians, the Altarians, and other very human-looking races, the tall whites, that look pretty much human. You put a pair of sunglasses on, they walk down the street, and you'd never think they were anything but another human.
Yes, yes. The Orionist people would also fit in that arena, right?
Orion?
Yes.
What are you saying? I try to avoid some of that vocabulary you hear in some of the internet sites, because a lot of people are making it up as they go. There are folks from Orion who certainly are our ancestors. The Native Americans, particularly the Lakota Sioux, talk about their origins in the Pleiades, and that other races on Earth came from the Orion and Sirius star systems. Then there are the praying mantis types who are humanoid, but have enough of a narrow, thin, kind of awkward, from our point of view, body structure that looks a bit like a praying mantis insect, that we give them that name. There are the reptoids, the humanoids, again with a kind of reptilian features, kind of a snoutish nose, face part, and scales on their skin, not huge scales, rather fine scales like on the belly of a chameleon, but enough to be a little different. The ones I call the Jawas because they kind of resemble the creatures in the Star Wars films. Short individuals that often wear robes and hoods. The tall whites are a very human-looking race, but just a little bit different. I've got on my website a section where I talk about pictures and photos of different star races, and people can go there to kind of see for themselves what these different folks look like. The tall whites are distinguished by they're in residence on Earth. They actually live in Nevada in the what we would call the nuclear test range in Indian Springs Valley, and have been there since before the white man came west in the covered wagon. So nobody kicks them out. They were there first, and they're very clear about that. The Sami is another race that migrated here from Barnard Star. They are absolute dead ringers for humans. I've met a Sami woman. The only difference between us and Samis, appearance-wise, is they have 24 teeth instead of the 32 teeth that humans have. But other than that, they're absolutely identical. They originally live above the Arctic Circle in Norway, Sweden, and Finland. Over the centuries, they've intermingled with Europeans and intermarried, and there's been some attenuation of their characteristics in some, but there are still some purebreds up there. Apparently, one of their original characteristics was reddish hair, and I met a very lovely redheaded Sami woman, artist, very accomplished, and delightful, charming person, and it was the first time I sat down and had breakfast with somebody whose ancestors came from the stars, so that was kind of fun. The Altair Aquila system people that Dr. Michael Wolf worked with at Area 51 and other locations, government laboratories, absolutely look human. There's a Semitic race, that's not their name, but they look human with large hooked noses. They look like sort of a somewhat exaggerated version of a Jewish person, but very human looking. And they came down and visited Holloman Air Force Base in the 1960s and talked to some generals there. There's the short, chubby dwarf types that are called the Onogi, with round, pudgy faces. They're very good at mechanics. Everybody seems to want to have one of those on board their starcraft in case they develop problems. Well, we also ought to keep in mind are the cetaceans. The dolphins and whales are intelligent species, telepathic, and from the stars. They were seeded here a long time ago, but we should recognize that just because they choose to live in the sea and don't make mechanical devices doesn't mean they aren't intelligent, telepathic persons and deserve their respect. You know, Captain Ahab going around harpooning them was very much not the right kind of behavior for these beings. And there's a race called what I call the bird people, sort of. They have long kind of a bird-like beak, but otherwise fairly humanoid features. And I'm real partial to one of them, Ashioma, that's not quite the right name. I'll keep coming to that in a minute. But he cured me of something my Earth doctor said was absolutely incurable. So I was very partial to him and his folks. There are the light beings who, you know, not everybody out there in space is flesh and blood solid. There are beings who are pure packages of energy or light and come and visit and then go away. And so we don't, while many of the races out there are solid flesh and blood and travel in spaceships, there are folks who are just energy packages and kind of project themselves here. So there's a lot of variety out there.
So those light beings could be correlated with what people know of as the orbs, correct?
Well, it'd be in the same ballpark, yes.
Well, here's do we want to take a caller now, Steve?
Oh, yeah.
It's up to Dr. Boylan. Are you ready for some calls?
Let's do it.
Let's bring them on then.
All righty. I'm going to click on 480. Thank you for holding on. You are live. Would you like to speak or ask Dr. Boylan a question?
480. You're on live. Try the next line, Douglas. I think they're probably still holding on, maybe.
Okay, we're going to go to 111. You are live. Would you like to ask Dr. Boylan a question? 111, you are live. Would you like to ask Dr. Boylan a question?
I believe that's a private caller calling in. Are you calling in to ask a question, 111? Please comment before we move on to the next caller.
Alrighty, let's try this one right here. We've got 353. You are live. Would you like to ask Dr. Boylan a question? Well, it doesn't seem like...
353. 353, you're on live. 353. Greetings. What's your name and where you're calling from?
Calling from
353. Ireland.
I'm calling from Ireland.
Okay, great.
Welcome to the show. Thank you for calling in. Do you have a question for Dr. Boylan, or do you have something that you'd like to share?
Absolutely.
Go right ahead.
Okay. Dr. Boylan there.
Hello.
Hello. Who am I speaking to?
This is Dr. Boylan. Would this be a gentleman by the name of Sweeps, perhaps?
Yeah, it would be a gentleman by the name of Sweeps, but of course, the way they play this, we don't know who's being answered on the phone. Strange outfit you got there, Doc. How you doing?
I'm good, thank you. How's things in Jolly Ireland?
From Radio Ireland.
Yes.
Yes.
Thanks for calling in, caller.
Ask you one good question here, okay? How's that?
Oh, go ahead. Ask as many as you want.
Okay, well, since Dr. Boylan and I are familiar with each other's work and backgrounds and this type of thing, I wanted to ask him how he got to be counselor.
Megan?
How he got to be a counselor.
Tell her I need cigarettes, too.
That's a good question.
Well, that is a good question.
It is.
And I'll tell you the short answer after I describe for everybody what a counselor means, since that word can mean various things in our language. What Sweets is talking about is a member of the Star Nations High Council, their governing group that governs the Star Nations organization that is spread across the galaxy. And every intelligent civilization that is a member of Star Nations has at least one representative who is called a counselor, a council member, if you will. When it comes to Earth, we're not ready to join Star Nations yet. We still got to clean up our act some more. But because of our perilous situation where we can either crash and burn as a civilization, blow ourselves up, or bio-warfare ourselves to death, or make it and become an advanced, a better kind of intelligent civilization, sensitive, spiritually advanced civilization. Because we're in the teeter-totter zone right now, and a lot of things are in the fats in the fire on that, the Star Nations representatives contacted me and asked me if I would volunteer to serve as council member for Earth, and I agreed to do that. So, what's that?
How did the contact begin, Doc?
Well, I was in dialogue with Ashioma Tekamayata, who's one of the council members, and over a period of time, and as we got to know each other better, he got his measurement of me and decided, I guess, that I would be appropriate in terms of level of awareness and judgment. So then he brought in counselor for the Watchers, another council member, who began dialogue with me. And after he further asked me a bunch of things and got comfortable with me, he popped the question. And I agreed to volunteer to serve in that role and have been serving since.
Interesting.
Yes,
getting back to something a little bit on what I call Earth Level 1. What do you know, or what have you heard from the Watchers regarding Cassini, the Large Hadron Collider? Things
Good
like
question.
Well, I haven't heard anything on the Large Hadron Collider. I think the Star Visitors figure that's humans playing physics with their science toys, and God bless them, hope they learn something.
I'll drink some.
I think there's a lot of hysteria about the Large Hadron Collider experiment, and on the Internet, some of it I'm sure is mischievous, and some of it people don't have enough to do, I guess. But if it were a serious hazard to human existence, the Star Visitors long since would have let me know, and I would have put the word out. But it isn't so. It's one of those human tinkerings that they sit back and watch us do.
Disinformation. You have any more questions for Dr. Boylan?
Do I have what? Sorry?
Do you have any more questions for Dr. Boylan?
Yeah, Dr. Boylan, I'd like to know when you're going to do the next Sweeps Fox show. I like this show, by the way. I don't want to put anybody off over there in the States.
Yeah, well, we'll work that out. I'm sure it's quite doable.
Okay, now the serious question now is about Cassini, because, they've got a big radiation payload that apparently they're going to dump into the hole in the North Pole of Saturn, which could ignite Saturn and send a lot of radiation our way. What do you hear about that?
I don't hear anything, which tells me, again, I think there's a lot more hysteria on the Internet than there is hard science.
No, I just hope the ETs are on top of all of this, and at least...
Oh, you may be sure they're on top of it in a way that would make the National Security Agency look like it was dead asleep.
I've got
listen, I appreciate you taking my call.
All the planets are kind of conscious person themselves as well, something that might melt our minds, but is the case. And if there were any human tinkering that was in danger of dramatically harming another planet, you may be sure the star visitors would take that little annoyance out of the equation. So, again, the fact that they haven't said anything about Cassini and have not intervened suggests that
you might want to pursue on this program with these fellows what's happening with the incoming asteroid and your attempt with your groups to use kinetic type of mental forces against it to stop it from impacting Earth. What's the latest on that?
Yeah, I suppose that we should mention that. Gotten information from star nations, the star visitors, who certainly have not gotten it from NASA, which only tells us what they think we are fit to know, that there is an asteroid out there heading towards Earth, and it's due to arrive on November 15th. Mm-hmm. And if it were to stay on course, it would plunk into the North Atlantic about 100 miles north of Bermuda and about 200 miles off the North Carolina coast. And it would bring a huge amount of force energy with it that would light up the sky for 1,000 miles, and would create very large tsunamis and earthquakes, and be quite a problem. The point of all of this is the star visitors giving us advanced information and giving it to people who are in a position to do something positive with that information rather than sit on it like NASA, is that we precisely do that, do something positive with the information. And a response I've put out there for people to consider is that we deflect it, and that we deflect it with thousands of humans, everyone who is aware of this problem and willing to summon their abilities, their psychic abilities, particularly the gift of telekinesis, the ability to move objects with mere, if you will, mental concentrated focus, is to move this asteroid out of the way so that, in point of fact, it does not enter Earth's atmosphere and plunge to the ocean and cause all these catastrophes, but moves aside and continues on its merry way somewhere else and leaves Earth alone. Star Nations is going to join us in this telekinetic effort, this asteroid diverting effort, and if there's any shortcomings on telekinesis, they, of course, have a highly advanced technology that can also be brought to bear to make sure the asteroid nudges out of the way. So we are, at this point, tentatively looking at November 15th before the asteroid enters our atmosphere to do the deflecting. I am in ongoing dialogue with Star Nations about refining the timing of this, but that's our tentative plan at this point. The main thing is that this, as we've done with other joint psychic exercises, that the combination of many, many thousands of humans of goodwill plus star visitors joining us in a cooperative way delivers quite a potent force for whatever objective we want to accomplish. And certainly there's been no, certainly no easily identifiable, more important objective than preserving Earth from huge catastrophe. So this will be a joint effort. And there is my particular feeling, intuition, if you will, that as humans mobilize themselves to join together in moving this asteroid out of the way by psychic ability, by psychic force, if you will, that we will wake ourselves and our fellow humans up to the fact that we have abilities, and that these abilities are wonderful, and that given important situations, they are crucial and vital. They're not just little toys we have or something we do in the parlor to amuse people when things get dull, that these are part of our repertoire of functioning as human beings, as starseed human beings, and that we darn well ought to get comfortable and in our using of them, and certainly this occasion will force, I think, anybody who's on the fence to get off the fence and join us in this telekinetic effort to move this asteroid out of the way.
Yes, sir, and that's November 15th, correct?
Yes, it is.
Wow. Well, let's bring on these more. We've got so many callers on the line just holding on, waiting for Dr. Boylan. 928, are you there? Can you give us where you're calling from and what's your first name? Caller, 928. Okay, we'll be moving on to the next caller. Please call back if you are interested in asking Dr. Boylan a question. Okay, we have 509 on the line. Where are you calling from and what's your name? 509. You are live on the line with Dr. Boylan. Please speak up. Are you there? Okay, that must be somebody just tuning in to listen. Okay, we have a private caller on the line. Are you there? Private caller, are you there ready to ask Dr. Boylan a question? Wow, okay, a lot of these callers, Dr. Boylan, are calling in just to listen. 111, you are there. Where are you calling from? What's your name?
Could that be me, the private caller?
Yes, ma'am. What's your name and where are you calling from?
This is Carol from California, and Dr. Boylan, you were kind enough to be on my conference call not too long ago. I want to thank you so very much, and it's wonderful to hear you today. You have some additional information that just really has piqued my interest. I have two questions, if that's all right, Steve.
Oh, no problem, no problem.
Thank you. One is regarding the asteroid. Would it be a good idea for us to engage our telekinesis at this point to help direct it off maybe a degree or two at this early point? And the other question, and then I'll mute out, is what do you know about the Arcturians and their purpose with us here?
Okay. About the asteroid, I have not gotten any information in the Star Nation that there's any rush. People who use kind of billiard ball physics to figure out, well, it's easier to move an object early in its path of motion rather than late. Well, you know, that's not as simple as it seems. In diverting the asteroid, we not only have to take into account Earth's preservation, but that we not mess up something else and have the asteroid carry them off and hit something else. Star Nations certainly will give information about the best time to do the deflecting, and so you know, there is no rush, no need to panic. I think the urge to try and do it real quick right now probably comes from a fear that it might not work, and oh golly, what if the waves get us? But I think we have to instead operate from our abilities rather than our fears, and certainly the combined effort of humans, all the star seeds and star kids focusing on diverting it, plus the many thousands, tens of thousands of star visitors whose powers are much greater than ours also focusing on diverting it, it will diverge. And as I said, the ace in the hole is that the star visitors certainly have technology that can nudge it out of its way too, if need be, if the combined telekinetic force were not enough. But I'm expecting that the combined telekinetic force will be enough, and they won't have to harness any of their advanced physics equipment to make it move.
Well, we'll watch your site for your recommendations, my dear.
Okay, very good. And on the Arcturians, they are another star system with an intelligent race that has had interaction with Earth. I know my friend Chief Golden Eagle has had interaction with them and thinks highly of them, so that's good enough for me.
Thank you so very much. I also
Well, Carol, if you have another question, go ahead and shoot it off.
Oh, I was just going to converse with Dr. Boylan for just one moment. My son lives up in South Dakota and has been a very good friend of Chief Golden Eagle. I've had him on our conference calls a couple times, but I can't get him to talk loud enough. Such a soft voice. And so I would love to have him on, but I can't get him to speak up. No diaphragm there, if you will. But, yes, anything new on the scene as far as any new visitors to our planet that you might share with us that may be coming on the scene that you haven't really had a lot of action with?
Well, another group that are here with a small contingent that I haven't mentioned on this interview yet are the Altamarians from Altamar, which is a planet that orbits a red dwarf out there in the general neighborhood of the Barnard Star cluster of red dwarfs. These folks have sent 12 of their very excellent environmental scientists to Earth to help work on our environmental damage and start to reverse it. And we are, of course, very grateful that they have come here and done this. They wish, and we starseeds wish that they could operate out in the open and have some Earth environmental scientists join them in working on these environmental improvements. But as it is currently, the situation is that they have to operate with a cloak of invisibility because Cabal is out in the skies in their surveillance craft and anti-gravity craft and so forth, looking for them so they can capture them and or kill them. Cabal do not want star visitors operating on the ground here. It would ruin their UFO cover-up. And furthermore, they don't want star visitors seen out in public doing good works like cleaning up the environment, because the Cabal want to portray the star visitors as evil, mean invaders, and there's nothing worse for that kind of propaganda than seeing a Altamarian cleaning up a river or an ocean estuary of the ill effects of pollution. That just ruins their propaganda image. So they are gunning for the Altamarians. So unfortunately, our 12 Altamarian scientists have to operate kind of under the radar screen quietly. But they are here, and again, they look very much close to humans. Again, if you put some very oversized sunglasses on them, they'd probably pass for a human in a crowd. But they're here in a very selfless way with a great deal of personal risk to try and help us with our environmental problems. And that kind of hard energy, one really has to stand back and admire.
Well, thank you, Doctor, and thank you, Steve.
Oh, anytime. Thank you for calling. We appreciate your call, definitely. Okay, we'll bring on our next caller. We have 928 on the line. Where are you calling from and what's your name? 928. You are on live with Dr. Richard Boylan. Are you ready? Okay, let me see. Let's bring on this next caller. We have a private caller, 111.
Hello?
Where are you calling from and what's your name?
Ann, Boston, Mass.
Okay, Ann, what's your question for Dr. Boylan today?
Well, it's kind of silly. I was in bed last week, and I felt like I was being penetrated by an alien. Is that possible?
You were being what by an alien?
Penetrated.
Penetrated. Well, it's not possible in a social way of speaking. Real star visitors do not accost humans in that kind of a way. But your experience, which I'm sorry for, I'm sure it was quite upsetting, does illustrate something that is going on that we need to talk about. And that is that the cabal, the Illuminati, New World Order, shadow government, whatever you want to call them, the powerful to rich power rulers behind the scenes have a very diabolical, clever propaganda campaign that they do, which consists of creating false encounters where they do it in several different ways. One of the ways is
this was very real. Like, I know it sounds weird, but it was very real.
I'm not saying
you.
Let me finish.
Okay, I'm sorry.
They have several ways they can do this. One of which is to secretly gas and inject a person with hypnotics and then assault them and plant the post-hypnotic suggestion that what the person saw was a star visitor doing it. That's probably their most frequent way. They can also do 3D solid holograms of star visitors in a person's room. And they certainly have people who dress up in star visitor suits and conduct themselves as they feel like, with the impression left that it was an alien that did it. So I don't know which of the three methods were done, but the behavior is absolutely wrong and violative, and is not the kind of thing star visitors do, but is very much the kind of thing the cabal and their operatives do far too often. I wish I had a dollar for every one of these I've heard of and worked with people through, because there's by lots, I mean many, many thousands of these instances going on, and it's just loathsome, and these criminals need to be brought to justice.
Yes, sir.
I've got a question for you, Dr. Boylan.
Hello?
White Letter Star has asked about how many Alpha Octane Indigo Elders are here, and then we'll get to your call, ma'am. That question again? It's how many all Alpha Octane Elders are here. It comes from White Lotus Star in the chat room. And it's Alpha Octane Elders.
Well, I don't recognize that term. Indigo is an old-fashioned term for what we now call star kids or starseed adults. It was an early attempt to recognize that a different batch of humans were being born and growing up. But the fancy adjectives in front of that term are meaningless to me, because I don't have any way to process those categories. What you see sometimes on the internet and in metaphysical chats are people throwing around terms without a great deal of concern for the accuracy of what they're saying. So I can't answer that question because the terminology is foreign.
Okay, well, caller on the line, private caller, do you have any more questions for Dr. Boylan?
Yes. So do you think this is going to follow me wherever I go, or because it happened in 2 different hotel rooms, and I'm freaking out. I don't want to go to any more hotels.
Well,
I'm trying to stay like really straight-headed about it, but it's real. I mean, these are like men with no eye sockets.
Well, obviously, they've done it before, and they're not stopped. They could do it again, I suppose. I think you need to report it.
Who do I report it to? Because I did it in New York.
Any sexual assault reported to the police, of course.
They didn't believe me. They did a rape kit, everything. They didn't believe me.
Well, I suppose maybe they couldn't handle the part about no eye sockets, but that's just the kind of stuff the cabal pulls so that nobody will take these reports seriously. But when you boil it all down to and take the Halloween costumes off, basically you've got one human sexually assaulting another, and that happens to be a felony in every state I've ever heard of, so it needs to get reported. That's not the end of your problems, but it is a step that makes you hot, and maybe them a little more cautious about accosting you again. The other thing I suggest is to use some shielding, psychic shielding.
Okay, that's what I want to hear. What do
you want an example of what psychic shielding would be?
Yes.
Well, again, may I refer you to my website because I have a detailed description of the procedure, Shielding 101, an effective technique. It's in the Star Kids section. And I suggest you look at that and do it. It's a 3-layer shielding that I suggest you do every day. And, in fact, every starseed and Star Kid, I think, should shield themselves every day, certainly with the basic white light of Source or God's blessing and uplifting. But for heavy-duty cases, and, given your recent experiences, I think you are at higher risk than the average starseed walking down the street. I suggest this heavy-duty triple shielding. And, again, I think it makes it more difficult for them to deal with you because of the energy and shielding you would put out.
I was wondering if you would contact the Boston police and tell them that I wasn't out of my mind. This really does happen.
Well,
you can refer them to Dr. Boylan's website at dr.boylan.com.
I'll do that.
Yeah.
Well,
really.
Thank you, caller. I definitely hope that helped you out a little bit. And please call in again. We have a lot of calls on the line for you, Dr. Boylan. So let's try to get on 919. Where are you calling from and what's your name?
Greetings. Good evening.
Greetings.
Hello?
Is this Miss White Lotus Star?
No, this is not.
No, it's not. Okay, I'm sorry about that. What's your name and where you're calling from?
Well, greetings to Counselor and greetings to you all. My name is
Greetings.
Brian. I'm calling from North Carolina.
Great,
Hello.
great. What's your question for Dr. Boylan today?
Well, my question, Counselor, is this. How are things gearing up for your upcoming workshop on the East Coast?
Well, things are moving right along. As of today, we have our minimum number to do the workshop, and we still have 2 months to go, so it looks like it's going to be a pretty healthy turnout. You're referring to the Star Kids and Starseeds workshop in Allentown, Pennsylvania that will take place the October 18th, 19th weekend. And if people, again, want any information about that, they can go to my website, and up near the top is a description of the workshop and what we do in those kind of workshops. Any Star Kids or Star Seeds that are just kind of coming to terms with themselves and still scratching their head and a little unsure about what they're all about and why they're different and are they the only one around or are there others, can come to this workshop and meet many dozens of other similar Star Kids and Star Seed adults and realize that they're perfectly normal. In fact, if the truth were known, they are the numerical majority of the population at this point in time in the human race and growing all the time. So I would extend that invitation to Star Seeds and Star Kids out there who would like to come. And my understanding is, friend, that you will be there, and I look very much forward to your good energies and participation too.
Indeed, indeed. I do look forward to such, as well as the people that will be attending that will be learning a lot in regards to their own healing, as well as for the healing of Gaia and everyone else around them that needs to be done.
Yes.
Well, you have any more questions or comments for Dr. Boylan today?
Well, there's one thing I would like to give a note of farewell to Counselor, as well as to you all. However, this will not be in human language.
Oh, great, great.
So, without further ado, and it is said.
Thank you, Fran. For those who may not be familiar with that language pattern, Fran is a human starseed who in a previous lifetime was a member of the praying mantis race of star visitors. And though she comes into a human body for this lifetime, one of the things she retains is a memory of the language of the mantis people. And that rhythmical clicking sounds that you heard are the language they use when they decide to speak out loud and not just resort to mental telepathy. So for those of you who have not heard a star person language spoken before, you just heard an earful.
That was amazing. We truly appreciate that blessing you sent out there. Wow, that was truly amazing.
You're most welcome.
Anytime. Do you have any more questions? Because you definitely have a fascinating outlook on things.
Indeed, but that will be it for this evening. For there's other folks that have questions and need light shed upon various things for their own healing needs. So I bid you love and peace, as I had just said in Mantish, and many good journeys ahead of you as far as humanity goes. Take care.
Right. Peace and oneness.
I'll answer you in Hindi with Namaste.
Namaste.
Namaste. Thank you very much for calling.
Amazing. We have 480 on the line. Where are you calling from and what's your name? 480. You're on live. Okay, well, let's try this other caller while the 480 hangs on. We have a private caller, 111. You are on live with Dr. Boylan. Do you have any questions for him? 111, you're on live. Private caller. Okay, let me see. Any more lines you see open right there, Douglas?
It looks like all the lines are open, and if anybody can hear the sound of my voice through the phone, we'd like you to speak up and ask Dr. Boylan a question.
I am Carol from California again.
There we go, okay.
Thank you, Steve. Dr. Boylan, a couple of years ago, my son was in Wagner, South Dakota, as well as Chief Golden Eagle, along with his wife Maria. And my son was about 60 miles away to the northwest of where this sighting was seen, and Chief Golden Eagle and his wife were coming from the southeast, headed west. Chief Golden Eagle's nephew was at their location down south there, which I won't mention, but anyway, they all saw this. There were 6. First of all, there was a little group of white lights in a circle many distances away. And the way that my son and the other 2 men were that saw this, there was a whoosh that came along. They were outside talking. So they walked around the house, and then they saw these little white light circles way off in the distance. And as they were standing there, then 6 great big orange lights in a parallel line came into their vision, very close. Like he said, it would be like if you took a cigarette, the hot end of a cigarette, and hold it out at an arm's length. That's about what they were seeing. Chief Golden Eagle and Maria saw it at the same time from their vantage point, and so did the nephew further south. And I just wonder, it gave about a 5-minute show, and it did all kinds of didos. It tracked, they'd all go out at one time, and then they'd come back on one at a time, and they'd do all kinds of things. Is that a real UFO, or is that a U.S. phony?
Well, the United States government, the cabal infiltrated portion of it, feels a number of anti-gravity craft that fly through the air And so technically, I've seen one of their crafts that creates a glowing orange ionization field around it, made by Northrop Aerospace in northwest of Lancaster, California, in the Tehachapi Mountains at their secret factory there. I've seen it test flown there and then test flown above the ridges of Groom mountain range at Area 51. So technically, the orange-ish glowing lights you described could be Cabal anti-gravity craft. However, I've not seen them do what we might call whimsical or creative kind of aerobatics like that. And I think, given the fact that Chief Golden Eagle and his wife were main witnesses to this demonstration, and also Golden Eagle's nephew, who I suspect I've met, another native of spiritual development, I think that the combination of who some of the prime audience were and the kind of lighthearted demonstration of presence and circling that they did has all the behavioral profile of star nations, of star visitors in those craft, and not Cabal machines.
That is such a blessing. I really thank you for that, because I have been very unsure of what they saw, but I thought, goodness, if Chief Golden Eagle didn't say it was Cabal, it must have been real, and I'm glad that you confirmed that. Thank you very much.
Well, you know, one of the things I think we all have to get good at, and I know our listeners are listening too, is to distinguish these sightings in the sky, because nowadays it is technically possible to see a Cabal anti-gravity craft or a genuine star visitor starcraft in the sky, you know, silent, noiseless, and wingless, moving along. And I think the real skill here in distinguishing which is which moves beyond what I talked about in terms of craft recognition and behavioral profile, if you will, of the way the craft move, to a even more deep and penetrating kind of way of distinguishing that pulls out our abilities as starseeds, and that is what I would call to make a heart connection with the craft. In other words, you, in your sensitive, spiritual, conscious, ready to love kind of a way of projecting yourself, project yourself towards the craft and see, and then listen to what kind of vibes you get back from the craft. And I mean, listen not with your ears, but with your heart, to what kind of vibes you get back from the people in the craft. And if it's star visitors, you'll get gentle, loving vibes, maybe even telepathic mental communication. If it's Cabal, you're going to get nothing, or you're going to get the kind of vibes that, you know, belong with basically black-hearted criminal types. So at a sensitive, psychic, spiritual, if you will, level of analyzing the craft and its occupants, a starseed can go a long way towards telling which is which by the process I just talked about.
Boy, that's really helpful. Thank you very, very much.
Can I ask you a question, Dr. Boylan, because that brings up a very interesting thing for me. Have you ever been contacted by negative sources besides positive sources?
What do you mean by sources?
By sources, I mean entities that come from other star systems. Have you ever had any encounter of entities that have come that are like warlord gods, if you will, or have a negative interest in affecting this planet? Because I get the impression that there are entities that are negative that have affected this planet, and there are entities that are positive, and it's like they're vying for our attention.
That's what the cabal would have you believe. That's one of their major propaganda lines. Their propaganda line goes like this: there are no such thing as UFOs. Well, if you don't believe that lie, then okay, you got us. There are UFOs, but they're full of evil, mean invaders. And if people have problem with that, then they go to the third level, which is, well, okay, you got us. There's some good guys out there and there's some bad guys, but you better watch out for the bad guys. Again, that is false in a practical sense, and what I mean by that is this. Star Nations maintains a protective cordon around Earth and does not allow any advanced civilizations, any spacefaring civilizations from other star systems to come here unless they are spiritually advanced enough to have our good interest at heart. They have to be members of Star Nations, and the threshold for that is spiritually and morally advanced civilizations. Mm-hmm. So we're not going to see any star visitors come here with ray guns or other menacing intentions. That just is not going to be allowed. And as to the question of my personal experience level, once, several years ago, the cabal, who have a stable of dark side magicians and psychics in their employment, and these folks are quite adept at the evil that they do, and one of the tricks they do on very special occasions is try to summon up a lesser evolved, dark-hearted energy from out in space to come here to torment somebody. And they did that in several years ago in a place I was. This lower level being, it was not what I would call a fully developed, intelligent person like you or me or the Zetas or the Mantis folks or whatever, but a kind of low-life, lower-level evolved being, and very aggressive. And this cabal's intention was that when this being got close enough to me, he would gobble me up at least at an energetic level and drain me of life force. But I was at the time with 3 other starseeds, and we decided to intercept. We had a little prior information from the helpful Zetas that this ambush was set up. And so when we got to the spot, we decided to kill them with kindness, if you will, not literally kill them, but whelm them with love. And so we set ourselves in a 4 directions array and just bombarded love and mental, good-hearted outreach to this being and tell him that he was fooled. He was sent here by the cabal. They told him he'd have a free high-energy meal and that he was really just a flunky to do their dirty work that they didn't have the guts to do themselves, and that this was pointless. And then we got even deeper into his soul and mind and pointed out to him that, running around mucking things up and being an aggressive lowlife is not really respecting that spark of source or God that is embedded in every person, including lesser evolved ones. And that if he really wanted to resonate with that spark of source or God within him, he would recognize that his behavior was out of line, and then we kind of called on him to reach for his highest and best inner potential, and that how much more fun and rewarding that would be if he were to do that. And we kept bombarding him with this, and eventually he backed off a little bit and indicated he was open to this new path, and the cabal certainly had no good deal for him, and basically it tricked him coming here. He wasn't going to get at me. I was very well shielded. I like that, I talked to that lady about it. Believe me, I use super duper shielding when I'm in these situations.
Yeah.
So he wasn't going to get anything, and he might as well instead listen to what we had to say and try something new that would be much more agreeable with his own inner highest potential. And after he decided that that's a path he wanted to try, then the Zeta came along and took him with them off to the side to help him learn a little bit more about how to make some advancement along the path of spiritual growth and moral growth. And we heard later on, sometime later, that he was making good progress, and so I guess we have to chalk up one for the good side.
It was very interesting.
That is astounding. Well, Dr. Boylan, to get on the controversial side of things, what's your thoughts on Project Bluebeam? Because it's been thrown around a lot on the internet as of lately.
Yeah, well, it's one of the hundreds of cabal disinformation and distraction projects that they do. If you bother to research this piece of fiction, and I'll use that word and not another word I could use, let's just call it a piece of fiction, that you will find out that the original lie had a due date of several years ago, so that even if it were true, the event that's supposed to have happened should have happened 2 years ago and didn't happen, so it clearly is a lie. But you know, the bottom line is even the promised event, the whole thing is a hoax and made up, and it's one of these razzle-dazzle kind of secret leak information, phony fake stories that the cabal like to put out to get all the folks that are excited by UFO stuff all up in a uproar and running off after this latest distraction, waste a lot of energy. And then finally, when it's beaten to death and proven to be a hoax beyond any possible doubt, the cabal have won because they've drained lots of people off on some wild goose chase and burned up lots of energy. And a few of them get so sick and tired of these things that they think the whole UFO field is a bunch of hooey and go off and read the evening news. So we have to be aware that that kind of psychological warfare is going on all the time because these guys want to rule the world with the stolen technology they got from crash saucers, and they're not about to give up their monopoly, and they're going to spend huge billions of dollars on having everybody who gets even close to the truth chase their tails with this kind of stuff.
Yeah.
Oh, human. And this explains why there's a missing link, that all those upright, rambling, shambling, low brow ridge type hulks that used to walk around dragging their knuckles on the ground are no longer among us and have been replaced by Homo sapiens. And star visitors allowed this experiment to go on about 175,000 years, and they saw that humans, developed culture and roamed around and spread across the lands. But they still retained an awful lot of the animal side aggressiveness and territoriality and dominance kind of way of conducting themselves. And so they came back, the star visitors did, and took some of the reproductive material from Homo sapiens and gene spliced some more of their genes in, and the resulting product was Homo sapiens sapiens, modern human. And again, they gave this about 175,000 years to run as and see how this model turned out. And things, as we know, advanced quite a bit. Humans spread across all 5 continents and developed high civilizations and made many advances. However, their technological and scientific advances got ahead of their moral and spiritual development, and probably the nth case of this imbalance was when we developed atomic bombs and then dropped them on a couple cities to obliterate them. At this point, the star visitor said, "Whoa, we have a problem, Houston. This experiment is not going as we had hoped." So that's when they started, give or take, to really try the third upgrade, Homo sapiens 3.0, if you will, which is the star kids and the star-seed adults, another genetic upgrade. And this one seems to have done the trick, because I've worked with many hundreds, if not thousands, of these star kids and star-seed adults.
And you believe this actually started in 1980 or around then?
Well, not exactly the very first prototypes. I'm a star seed, and I hatched a lot earlier than 1980, I assure you. These kids are formed in two basic ways, one of which is their parents were visited by a star visitor who borrowed some of their reproductive material, did a little what we would call gene splicing with it, adding a bit of the star visitor genes, and then when that adult went on to have children, the child they have is much more advanced than the regular kids of previous time. The other way that happens is star visitor, as many of them are doing, observes Earth and our civilization and the troubles we're having, and decides to incarnate as a human for this incarnational lifetime go-around to come down here and help. And these star visitors, when they incarnate as a human, bring along enough of their advanced consciousness and psychic abilities that even though they look completely human, that they function at a higher level. So these are the two ways that star kids happen, and of course once star kids hit 18, you stop calling them kids, and so the term we tend to use is starseed adult. And these are the advanced people that are in our population in increasing numbers. They really started pouring in the late 1980s. And now we have a situation where so many of the children being born are star kids that they constitute over 96% of the kids being born today. So you can see that within a generation or two, the entire human race is going to be star seeds.
Wow, that is truly amazing. What began this upgrade or jump start to this dispensation of these star seeds?
Well, as they say, I'm glad you asked me that question. I'm going to give you and the listeners a very, very quick review of a revised history of the human race. The parts that matter are these. About 350,000 years ago, star visitors came down and took some primate genetic material, reproductive material, and gene spliced some of their own genes into it. And the resulting product was what we call Homo sapiens. The original people were not either of those. They were telling the truth. Some of them held very responsible positions in society. And so I became intrigued by this, and I began working with these experiencers and putting out word in the community that I welcomed other people who had had these kind of experiences to come in and talk. And pretty soon we had a support group going, and it grew. And as I followed these experiencers over the next several years, I noticed a pattern that when they had kids, these kids were more advanced than regular kids. They were psychic. They seemed to grow up faster. They seemed like adults in kid bodies. They were strikingly different and advanced. And so I started not only paying attention to these experiencers, but also to these what I now call star kids, these transformed kids that they were having as a result of either visits or the star visitors coming down and becoming the person that was incorporated in the child they had. So that work has pretty much taken over and consumed my focus from then on. These past what is it now? A good almost 15 years. So it has been quite a journey.
It definitely sounds like that. Well, what do you think about that, Douglas? That is a wild journey, if you ask me.
Well, it's always interesting when people find that they're kind of involved in traditional things, and then all of a sudden something that's kind of outside of that comes into the foray, and then that becomes the primary work. One of the things that I noticed on your website is that you talk about star kids and star seeds, and I was wondering if you could explain what is a star kid and what is a star seed.
Okay, very simply. A star kid is a child who's more advanced, brighter, usually has a more robust health and immune system. They tend to have double handfuls of psychic gifts. They tend to grow up faster and yet age more gracefully at the back end of their life, more what we would call more slowly aging, more like 1939. And then there were a few prototypes even before that. Nikola Tesla, Albert Einstein come to mind,
yes,
and a few other outstanding individuals. But it was in the 1980s that they tinkered with the recipe, I can assure you, because I'm an old model star seed, and these star kids being born today can run circles around me. So they tinkered with the recipe a bit, and by the late 1980s, they had gotten it right, and they started going high volume. And as I say, the star kids pouring in now reached a point where now almost all the kids being born are star kids, and we have a real revolution in human society happening kind of underneath us in a quiet way that soon will not be so quiet.
Well,
oh, go ahead, Douglas.
I was just going to say, well, do you think within the context of star seeds, as far as the genetic engineering that we're going through, that it's designed to assist us to evolve beyond I noticed some of the things that you referred to in your website about basically false doctrine or artificial disseminated information to kind of confuse us and so on. Do you think that these star seeds and these star kids are here to simply evolve the human species into something more responsible and conducive to the bio design that we are?
Absolutely. That is the whole point. And this is not just an arbitrary tinkering in a biology lab, on the part of the star visitors. Mm-hmm. Their intent is that we reach our fullest and highest potential as intelligent spiritual beings. Mm-hmm. And that is the whole point of the recipe tinkering, if you will. Every planet's different, and every planet's native species are different, and when the star visitors came down, and out of respect for Earth and her natural animal life here, picked the what seemed like the most promising species, primates, to grasp some intelligence onto. They did so with the understanding that there's a bit of imprecision when you do this on every planet. And
well, Dr. Boylan, I'm sure you know of Zecharia Sitchin's work, and he also speaks about the genetic manipulation that went on during the ancients, and he also refers of the primates at the time.
Well, I get a lot of technical difficulty visited on me when I interview with various programs, because there are folks and forces out there that just do not want what I have to share to reach the public, so...
and I definitely understand that. Yeah, because I went into your website and I was looking at all of the information, and obviously you know your stuff. You are very well researched, and I appreciate that, because I'm an individual. I've actually had a UFO experience where I've seen a UFO. The experience was involved where the daughter of the woman was communicating with the UFO, and the entities on the UFO communicated to the lady's daughter that they were there for her, just not at that time. And so it is very interesting that UFOs and aliens are basically something that certain elements don't want us to interact with, don't want us to understand, and so on.
Yes, sir. Well, Dr. Boylan, we would love to start off with the most simplest question, which would be, how and what got you into the starseed research?
Well, I was a mild-mannered psychologist for many a year, counseling people, and in 1989, things took a little turn in a different direction. That was the first year that people started to come in, and after we chatted a bit about their day-to-day problems, they decided to let their hair down and tell me about an encounter they had had with a visitor from the stars. And they said, Doc, I'll fully understand if you commit me to the mental institution here. But I had already seen a UFO for myself and read on this subject a very long time. In fact, I was around before there was a UFO cover-up. When the day when UFOs were sighted, it was reported in the newspaper like the weather and news from Washington and anything else. So, old-timers like myself aren't very impressed by the UFO cover-up because we know it was artificially imposed and that the truth used to be told without drama decades ago. So when these clients of mine told about their encounters, I listened carefully, and of course I used my psychologist skills, and I could tell whether a person was mentally ill or making it up as they go or not. And these